All right, hello YouTube. Welcome back to the Grease Gum YouTube channel. Today's video, we are going to be talking about Jon IX of Game of Thrones. It is his last chapter in book 1. We only have 2 chapters after this, so getting very close to the end. But Jon IX is the conclusion of Jon's storyline, and he's very similar to Daenerys in a way. I just think Daenerys' storyline is much better than his. It's more exciting, but both characters seem to have this natural endpoint in terms of growing their character and establishing who they're going to be going forward. Not to say that those characters are not going to develop in the other books, but their storyline of self-discovery, for the most part, was this first book. And that's kind of where we get to with Jon, because Jon, for the last couple chapters, has felt very torn between, his father, his family, the love that he has for them, over his duty and his loyalty to the Watch. And now his loyalty feels somewhat torn. What is the right decision? When he talks to Aemon, he says that his father would always do the right thing. Well, what is the right thing? And that's what Jon is going to be struggling with in this chapter. But let's start on page 772. The chapter opens with Jon calming or preparing his horse for travel and calling Ghost to him, which seemed that Ghost showed up instantly. It's a bit of foreshadowing that Jon and Ghost are connected not only just because it's, his pet more or less, it is also something in their minds. They're actually connected as a whole. But Sam tells Jon he must not do this as he wheels the horse towards the door, which Sam's huge shadow tries to block. Jon tells him to get out of the way. Instantly, we're left with this idea of, whoa, what is Jon doing? He seems to be going and leaving or whatnot, and the last chapter set up this huge decision Jon will have to make, and it seems like Jon has made that decision. Sam continues noting he cannot do this, but Jon coolly responds he would rather not hurt him, but if he does not move, he will have to ride him down. Jon obviously doesn't think he's going to kill Sam or anything like that, but he still is serious. He's trying to tell Sam, I'm serious. You're not going to be able to stop me. But he knows Sam's going to jump out of the way. Sam says he won't, but Jon ushers his horse, who begins towards the door. Sam is shocked by this, but moves at the last instant to avoid being collided into as Jon enters the outside nighttime. That'll get us on page 773. Jon raised the hood of his cloak. He knew men would be watching, but none would be looking south. All would be looking north. No one would see him except Sam. I will say for Jon, this is quite interesting to think about, that no one, not even a single person, is going to think, hey, it is kind of weird that there's this horse leaving the castle. Even hearing a horse at night being saddled up is quite weird. Any of those could make sound to make it to where somebody would hear Jon leaving. Now, you also point that idea with the fact that Jon has quite publicly made it a front that he might leave, in terms of his conversation with Aemon, in terms of his talks with Sam, even his conversation with Mormont, where he's talked about, having some loyalties to his father. It is, I think, a little bit of short-sighted thinking to not think that somebody else might be overlooking him to make sure he doesn't leave, or seeing if he will leave. He says out loud that he did warn him to move and thinks hopefully he did not hurt himself getting out of the way. Not really talking to anyone but himself, because he's still trying to rationalize that he's doing the right thing. But as he flexes his hand, he still notes the pain in his burned hand, but it felt good to be free of the wrappings. Moonlight showed the land before him, and as he thinks he will follow the King's Road for the night, as speed was more important than deception for now. And he's totally right. If you're trying to get far away from the Watch, you don't expect people to really be on you until morning come. You're not doing your duties and all the things like Jon's going to think about here. But in terms of speed, yeah, the King's Road's the best idea here, because it's less likely your horse is going to trip or fall because you're on a road. If you're going off-road at nighttime, it's going to be way easier to lose your way. It's going to be way easier for your horse to trip on something and die, or trip on something and fall and, maybe fall on you, kill you, break your neck. So Jon, I think, is very smart to do that if he's trying to get away quickly, and or as for getting as much distance away from them as they can, because the farther Jon gets away from the Watch and the wall, it'll be easier for him to not be tracked. He notes he would stay on the road until the sun came up, then he would get off the road. It wasn't like they wouldn't know where he was going. Again, another good point, like, they know what Jon's end destination is going to be. So if they were to come running after him, they would know where he's going. Jon thinks that Mormont rises at first light, so he had until dawn before they realized he was gone, unless Sam betrayed him. He does realize that Sam loves him, so it's not likely that Sam was going to go to Mormont in the middle of the night. He was kind of too scared to do things like that. But if Sam was questioned, he would give up what happened to Jon. So I think at this point, you're sitting here with Jon going, I think I've probably bought myself enough time until they start questioning Sam, not Sam going to them. Jon knew that once he did not turn up with Mormont's breakfast, they would check his sleeping cell and find Longclaw left behind. He had struggled to part with it himself, but he had not lost all of his honor, and even Jorah Mormont had left it behind. Again, it's another one of those struggles where it's like, this is a Valyrian sword, one of the very few left in the world, and he has to part with it because it's not the honorable thing to do to bring it with him, and so he leaves it. But he knew this would be a wound for Mormont. After Jorah had fled, now it's Jon himself fleeing. But he felt like either way he went, he was betraying someone. And I think that's a great point, a great rationalization by Jon. There's no real winning scenario here. Think about what Aemon talks about in the last chapter with Jon, right? This idea that even though he may have stuck to his vows and did what he thought was right in his duty, he still thinks about his family, and he wasn't there to help them, to protect them. Could he have changed anything? Who knows? But that's the problem with Jon. If he goes, he's betraying Mormont, he's betraying his vows. But if he stays, he's betraying, in his eyes, his family. He's not going to help them. So Jon feels stuck. There is no real right answer. Pythagoras is in page 774. He did not know what the honorable thing was. The South had it easy with their septons to tell them the right thing to do, but the old gods with their heart trees would give him no answer. Another little hint here, because I want to do a video on it, it really shows like how religion holds such a sway, right? Think about even how Jon thinks about the new gods, right? Or the seven, that they hold such a sway, even though Jon doesn't, believe in them. It is quite interesting the way people will blindly follow septons and things of that nature, believing that they know what is right. When Jon could not see the lights of Castle Black, he slowed, as he would need the horse. And he could possibly trade it for a fresh mount at any of the holdfaster villages on his way, but not if it was injured. Yeah, this horse is Jon's life. If this horse dies or breaks a leg or a hoof or something, he is screwed. He will not be able to get a fresh horse. He has no money. He has nothing to trade with. He'd have to try and steal it. And eventually at that point, if his horse breaks down and he's going on foot, the watch is going to catch him at some point or another, or he's going to run out of food or supplies, be forced to do more desperate actions. We see that in Bran's chapter when he's attacked by the wildlings and the deserters. He knew he would need to find and or steal new clothes as he was dressed in all black, the colors of the watch. He would be viewed suspiciously by anyone. Dressing up all in black is just a bad omen in general. It'll make you kind of look like this villainous character or someone from the watch, but if you're from the watch, what are you doing in this castle or city or village or whatnot, wherever Jon was to go? But once Aemon set out the ravens, he would find no shelter, not even at Winterfell. Sure, Bran would want him to come in and let him in, but Lewin would not open the gates and would send him away. Even where Jon is most loved, he would find no shelter. It shows you how this world is and how really people treat deserters. But a part of him longed for Winterfell, to see the great hall, eat Gage's meals, listen to old Nan, and hear Bran laugh again. Jon is really missing home. But Jon had not left the wall for that. He was Ned's son, and Robb was his brother. No sword, not even Longclaw, could change that. He was not Maester Aemon either. Jon is someone that is on a pretty singular mission. He wants to avenge his father and bring the Lannisters to justice. That is what his motivation is. And, we're going to talk about this later on when we get to his conversation with Mormont in this chapter, but Jon himself is not really going to change much. Some people have asked, like, why don't I do a what if Jon actually was to make it to Robb? I don't really think it changes that much, and that's kind of what Mormont's going to tell him later on. But he notes how Aemon had chosen to stay 3 times, and now Jon could not decide if he was craven or strong and true. He now understood what Aemon had meant and his choosing. It's kind of interesting that Jon kind of contemplates Aemon as a character. Was he weak because he was too craven to go help his family? Or was he really strong because he was able to not give in to those temptations and stay loyal to his vows. And I think all of us, the readers, would definitely lean to he was very strong, staying steadfast in his vows, where he is given every opportunity to try and help his family, even though it may mean his own death, but he doesn't. He stays strong and knows where his place is. It's very interesting. I think Aemon is one of the most interesting characters within the entire story, and this kind of goes to show why. Because we're seeing it through Jon of what Aemon dealt with that many times. But into page 775, he then thinks of Tyrion, who had said that most men deny a hard truth than face it. Jon was done denying who he was, a bastard, oath-breaker, friendless, and damned. For the rest of his life, he would be an outcast, hiding his true name. And this is what I mean when Tyrion's advice is sometimes detrimental. Because Tyrion himself goes into this thinking as well, that Tyrion is, trying to play this monster role and all these things, and it gets him into trouble in A Storm of Swords. Jon here is not really realizing what the hard truth is. The hard truth is Jon can't do anything about what's happening down south. He's still in the very top of the country. Robb is at River Run in a war at the moment. What is Jon really going to do? The hard truth is that Jon can't be the person. He can't be the hero to avenge Ned. He has other duties. He has other things that he has now said the oath. He has said the vows. He has to take those up. He's taken what Tyrion's advice is and kind of spun it to fit what's going on with his own life. And that's not really truly what's going on. But another part of this I think is very interesting is a lot of this is a little bit of kind of foreshadowing to his actual real parentage. Regardless of what you think, he says that you'd have to be forced to hide his true name. And whether that's Stark or Targaryen, whatever you believe, this is foreshadowing to that, hey, what an irony is it that Jon's already been doing that his entire life. But for the rest of his life, he must live a lie or have every man raise a hand to him. But it made no matter. As long as he lived long enough to help his father, or to help his brother avenge his father, it didn't matter. Again, Jon is trying to be the hero in the story, but he just is misguided. He remembered the last time he had seen Robb smiling in the yard. He knew he would have to disguise himself upon meeting Robb, and Robb would shake his hand, smile, but this, Jon falters. He would say, what? Jon could not see the smile, though he remembers the day Ned had beheaded the Night's Watchman. As Ned had told him, he had taken a vow before his brother, before the old gods and the new, as Theon presented Ned with ice and the blood spurting on the man's death, and Theon kicking the man's head. So, I think this is interesting, because Jon is kind of second-guessing himself. If he goes all this way to meet Robb, and if he can even get an audience with Robb, saying that, he's Jon or whatever, what would Robb do? Would Robb have him killed for deserting the watch? Would he embrace him? What would he do? And the question here is interesting because we actually know what Robb would do. Robb talks about Jon and his oaths later on in the story when, Robb is contemplating making Jon his heir. We know that Robb would allow Jon to not, would allow Jon to be part of his army and to assist him. He would allow that to happen. But from Jon's point of view, he doesn't know that. And given, how honorable the Starks are, the way Ned has brought them up, even Jon himself is kind of conflicted on what Robb would do. And he even wonders what Ned would have done if it had been Benjen instead. Like, think about this. This is a very interesting point. What if Benjen came back to Ned after deserting and saying the White Walkers or the others are coming, and he's seen, his men die and all these things? What would Ned do? And Jon thinks it surely would have been different, and I also kind of believe it would have been. I think it would have been different. I don't know if Ned would have, condemned his brother to death. Surely Robb would welcome him. He must, or else. And Jon can't really think about that, right? Because just like Daenerys and her storyline, if Jon starts thinking about his actions and past things, he's lost. He's made his decision. He has to stick with it. If he starts second-guessing himself now, he may screw up. But he knew he could not think about it now, as he spurns his horse faster, as if he could outrun his doubts. And that gets us into page 776. Jon was not afraid of death, but he did not want to be beheaded like some common person. He wanted to go out sword in hand. He was no true Stark, but he would go down fighting like one, and let them say Ned has 4 true sons, not 3. Again, we can see why Jon is doing this. Jon is craving this dream of being the hero, of being a Stark, through all these actions that he's legitimized, it's just not the way it goes in this world. He's still kind of living in a fairy tale, and he's not really looking at what his real place is. He is someone that's just fought the dead and killed one of the only others or whites that we've seen in thousands of years. And at this point of the story, his focus should be on that threat, not, his personal family stuff that's going on. But not only that, Jon wants to be viewed as an equal to Robb. It's something that is brought up consistently through the story, and especially this first book. But it's just never going to happen. Ghost kept pace with him and the horse for a while, but eventually he stopped. But Jon knew he would follow them, but at his own pace. Now, this is an interesting point, right? At this time, we see Ghost go off and do his own thing. And when Ghost comes back, it's at a very opportune moment. I think at this time, when we see Ghost, go off and do his own thing, I think he is being warged. He is being manipulated at this point, whether that's by Bloodraven, by the Three-Eyed Crow, or this idea of Bran in the past, or doing that to influence events, whatever you think is happening here. There's obviously something going on, because I'll talk about it when we get to that point when his friends show up. But Jon made it to Molestown, noting the town was very quiet and still, but light could be seen in some buildings through window slits. Jon thinks how Molestown was bigger than it appeared, as much of it was underground. Really interesting description of Molestown. It's very unique in terms of being underground. There are not a lot of places like this in Westeros. I just found that's a very interesting description, and we get to see a little bit more of it as we go forward in the story, especially in A Dance with Dragons. But yeah, interesting description. He asks, or he thinks, how many of his brothers called the whorehouse buried treasure. In truth, that was oath-breaking as well, but no one seemed to care. Jon is again rationalizing leaving the wall. All these men are allowed to go whoring and all this other stuff, but he's not allowed to go avenge his family. It kind of seems hypocritical. That's how Jon is trying to interpret it, so that he feels like he's in the right. He did not slow and stop until he was well past the town, where he stopped near a pool of water to refresh himself. His hand hurt worse than ever, and his head was throbbing. He wonders why doing the right thing felt so bad. And it's because Jon, subconsciously is realizing this is not the right thing to do. He might want it to be the right thing to do, but it isn't. He needs to fulfill his duty and his oaths that he has taken. That gets us into page 777. Nice little number there. He wonders why he had pushed the horse so hard. That was stupid. He was asking for a broken neck. But from here, he decided to walk the horse on the road, as it was a small part of the road. Only 2 men could walk abreast here. Makes sense, and also just to give the horse a break. I mean, you've really been driving the horse very hard after leaving Castle Black. You want to give it a little bit of a rest. But off in the trees, he heard a scream of some frightened animal, and his horse began to become nervous. Jon thinks, did Ghost find some prey? But Jon calls for Ghost, but there is no answer except for owls. This is a key point, because this probably was Ghost, or maybe it was his friends or something, but the fact that Ghost is not seeming to listen to Jon in this moment is weird, because that's never happening through the story. Unless there's moments where it seems like there's some sort of other thing going on. In my opinion, like I talked about, Ghost is being manipulated at this time, where Jon does not have as much control over Ghost as he usually does. Frowning, Jon continues for another half an hour, leading the horse until it was dry. Jon wanted to mount up, but he was concerned about Ghost. He called again for him. There was no answer. Nothing should be able to frighten Ghost unless there was a bear, but Ghost was too smart for that. Or maybe even a pack of wolves, but Jon thinks he would have heard them howl. Again, why is Jon so frightened about Ghost? Why is George putting so much emphasis on this? All of it seems to be there for a reason that has yet to be really fully discovered within the story of A Song of Ice and Fire. He decides to eat, as he has a biscuit, apple, and a piece of cheese. He had more meat he had gotten from the kitchens, but he would need that for tomorrow. Because once your food runs out, you're in a really bad spot, because you either need to steal food, you need to forage for your own food. Regardless, all of that is going to take much longer, and as Jon thinks, slow him down greatly. While eating, he was almost done with the apple when he heard the sound of hooves coming from the north, and this has got to be a shock to Jon. He's in the middle of the night, there shouldn't be anyone traveling. Why does he hear a bunch of hooves? They had heard him for a certainty, and he could not outrun them. And if they were from Castle Black, that would be dire for Jon. He would be caught, and he would be, said he's a deserter. He led the mare off the road, attempting to hide, but thinks that hopefully they will ride past. Like as not, they were farmers coming from Molestown, going back to their fields. But Jon thinks, why are they traveling at night? Yeah, this makes no sense. Jon tries to bring up some rationale to give himself a little bit more peace, but his logic doesn't make any sense. This obviously had to be somebody that's being sent out to find Jon. There's just nobody's traveling this late at night. If you're going to be at Molestown, you're going to spend the night. So, unfortunately for Jon, or maybe fortunately for Jon, it is going to be somebody else. That leads us to page 778. He listened to the sounds as they grew closer to him. There seemed to be 5 or 6 of them at least. Someone asks if they are certain that they came this way. What if he went east instead, or cut through the left through the woods? Another voice says, this is stupid, as it is the night. His horse could easily fall and break his neck or get lost. Yeah, there's no reason for him to not take any other route except for the King's Road. Maybe he could go east, but given that they're looking for Jon and Jon wants to get to the river run very quickly, this is the quickest way. Gren then pipes up saying he would go south as you can follow the stars. But Pip notes, what if it was cloudy? But Gren then notes he would not have gone then. Another voice broke in, it was Toad's, noting he would be at Molestown digging for treasure as he laughs. Holder then tells him to be quiet. He thinks he heard something, and Gran agrees as the horses stop. They all fell silent, and Jon realizes what Sam had done. He had woken the other boys, his friends. He thinks they will be caught for deserters too. What were they thinking? The silence went on for some time. Jon could see their horse legs when Pip asks what Halder heard, and he is uncertain, but he thinks he heard a horse. So it's interesting here that Jon is worrying about them being caught for deserters, when I actually don't think that's the case. Like, if they just told them, yeah, we were looking for Jon, we wanted to bring him back, they wouldn't be caught for deserters. Like, it's quite obvious what their purpose is, but Jon is just kind of annoyed, I think. He's more in an annoyed state that people came after him more than just, actually thinking rationally. Pip notes there is something here, but at the moment, Ghost comes bounding out of the shadows, scaring Jon's horse, making a sound, and the men knew exactly where Jon is. This does not seem to be a coincidence. George does not write coincidences like this. This seems to have been planned. Because if Ghost had not come out of the trees at this moment, they likely would have kept riding on, and Jon would never have been caught in time. But because Ghost jumps out at this exact moment, it allows Jon to be caught and sent back to the wall. This is why I think a lot of people in the community, especially myself, believe that there was a lot of manipulation going on within Ghost at this moment. But that gets us into page 779. Jon calls Ghost a traitor and tries to turn to mount his horse and run, but Pip calls to him to stop, and Gren notes he cannot run from them all. Jon notes that he does not want to hurt them, but he has sword in hand. He will if he has to. 1 against 7, Halder notes as they spread out around him. Jon asks what they want as Pip notes to take him back to where he belongs. Obviously, Jon's not going to be able to run away. As 7 men are now against Jon on all sides of him, he's not going to be able to outrun them. Even though he's a better swordsman, there's still 7 of them. They'll be able to whack him in the back or whatnot. But they want to bring him back, right? They don't want their friend to be beheaded. Jon says he belongs with his brother, but Gren notes they are his brothers now. Toad notes they will cut his head off, and it is so stupid of Jon. He is being like Gren, who himself knows he said the words. He is no oathbreaker. Now, Jon thinks that he is also not an oathbreaker, but they don't understand. They killed his father, and his brother is at war. But Jon is kind of interesting, right? He doesn't think of himself as an oathbreaker in this moment, but he is. He is about to break his vows to the Watch. But it's just that value system. You have to justify your actions. There's this interesting idea that like everyone has to believe that they are the hero or they are the good guy in their own story. So how, when you have the worst people in the world, do they justify their actions? Now, Jon is by no means a horrible person, but he has to justify his actions, and this is how he's going to do it, right? That, his father was killed and his brother is at war. But Pip notes they already know. Sam told them everything. Gren continues saying they are sorry about his father, but it does not matter. Once you say the words, you cannot leave. And I want to read from the book here because it's another huge moment of this chapter. I'm going to read another moment later on, but this is just a huge moment for Jon in this first book that really turns the tide and gets him to come back. I have to, Jon said fervently. You said the words, Pip reminded him. Now my watch begins, you said it. It shall not end until my death. I shall live and die at my post, Gren added, nodding. You don't have to tell me the words. I know them as well as you do. He was angry now. Why couldn't they let him go in peace? They were only making it harder. I am the sword in the darkness, Halder intoned. The watcher on the walls, piped Toad. Jon cursed them all to their faces. They took no notice. Pip spurred his horse closer, reciting, I am the fire that burns against the cold, the light that brings the dawn, the horn that wakes the sleepers, the shield that guards the realm of men. Stay back, Jon warned them, brandishing his sword. I meant it, Pip. They weren't even wearing armor. He could cut them to pieces if he had to. Mathar had circled behind him. He joined the chorus. I pledge my life and honor to the Night's Watch. Jon kicked his mare, spinning her in a circle. The boys were all around him now, closing from every side. For this night, Halder trotted in from the left. And all the nights to come, finished Pip. He reached over for Jon's reins. So here are your choices. Kill me or come back with me. Jon lifted his sword and lowered it. Helpless, damn you, he said. Damn you all. Do we have to bind your hands, or will you give us your word you'll ride back peacefully? Asked Halder. I won't run if that's what you mean. Ghost moved out from under the tree, and Jon glared at him. Small help you were, he said. The deep red eyes looked at him knowingly. We had best hurry, Pip said. If we're not back to before first light, the old bear will have all of our heads. And about this quote, it's just a perfect quote, reminding Jon of his vows while also distracting him as they come in, giving him this choice, which they know. They know Jon would never kill any of them. And that's exactly what they pose. Either you can kill them or you can come back with them. And so I really love that moment in the story. It's a very impactful moment for Jon. And Jon's still not bought in, right? Jon still thinks he will eventually just leave them. But it's enough to get to Jon. It's enough to get to that consciousness that he knows that he is doing the wrong thing. He feels horrible about it. But another part of this I find is interesting is that Ghost, at no point does he ever interfere of what is going on here. Jon even points that out in the part that I read. It points once again to this idea that there's some other entity manipulating Ghost. Or maybe even Ghost knows subconsciously based off of Jon that he shouldn't do anything. It's a very interesting moment in my opinion. But of the ride back, Jon remembered little as they went. They had made good time, getting back an hour before dawn. But this time the wall didn't quite feel like home. Because this time Jon was going against his will, more or less. The first time he had come to the wall, he had come wanting to be here. Jon thinks they could take him back, but they could not make him stay forever. The war would go on for some time. He would bide his time, convince them he was content, and then leave again, this time with a different route, either going west or east. Something I don't think really Jon understands is that, yes, maybe it would be harder to find you, but that would take the journey much, much longer to actually get to Robb, to where it would be even more stupid for Jon to desert in that point. But that gets us to page 781. I forgot to mention this, I did read through most of 780 on that chapter on that reading, so that's why that page was kind of short. Page 781 opens with Sam awaiting them in the stables, too anxious to sleep. He says he is happy they found him, but Jon himself is not so. Pip then looks at the lighting of the sky with disgust as he asks Sam to help them with the horses as they must face the day with no sleep. It really shows how great Jon's friends are, that they're willing to give up their own sleep, their own well-being to help Jon come back so that he doesn't end up getting himself killed. When day broke, Jon did his usual duties of getting Mormont's breakfast from Three Finger Hob and bringing it to him in the king's tower. Mormont tells him to put it on the table and that he would like some beer. Jon grabbed the horn of ale and the lemon he had been given. He crushed it in the beer as he did every morning. Mormont, very interesting, claimed that it was the reason he still had teeth, which is far from the truth because lemon is very acidic and would actually be worse for your teeth enamel, but we'll let Mormont slide on this one, as usually has wise wisdom, or usually has wise counsel. Mormont starts by saying, doubtless, Jon loved his father, and that the things we love destroy us every time. And he's very correct. This is basically Jon's story in a nutshell, is that Jon is constantly being tested on his vows and his love, and love sometimes wins through. He asks if Jon remembers when he had told him that. Jon does, but he is in no mood of speaking of his father's death. One, Jon is moody from getting no sleep at all during the night, being brought back, and also he doesn't want to speak of these things. That is the reason that he left. Mormont tells him to never forget it, as hard truths are the ones to hold tight, as he notes it is ham for breakfast once again. He then proceeds to ask if his moonlight ride was so taxing on him. Well, there's two things I want to point out in this. One, what did I talk about at the very beginning of this chapter? That Jon kind of doesn't understand Tyrion's advice about hard truths in that moment. Mormont directly says hard truths to paraphrase that, because the hard truth is Jon just doesn't have really a point of going south. The hard truth is he is a man of the Night's Watch, and that is what he is. But also that Mormont knows about his ride. This is shocking to Jon. Well, how did Mormont know? And that's the interesting part, is it seems like, duh, they knew. I mean, Jon, you're going around being very mopey and moody. Of course he's going to have people watching you, because you seem like you're going to desert. You weren't exactly hiding it that well. But Jon is shocked, asking how he knew. Mormont asks if Jon thinks he is stupid. They did not choose him to be Lord Commander for being stupid. Aemon told him he would leave, and Mormont had told him he would be back. Mormont knew his men and boys. Honor made him leave, and honor also brought him back. It really shows a lot of that wisdom that Mormont has. Something that Ned also puts into his sons. You have to know your men. And Mormont does that perfectly. He knew that Jon would leave, but also that people would help him and make sure that he came back. But Jon spits back that his friends brought him back. And Mormont fires back saying he did not say his honor. Jon continues asking, what was he supposed to do? They killed his father. Did they expect him to do nothing? But Mormont once again has the answer exactly. They suspected him to do exactly what he did. Mormont had placed a watch on him, and he should be thankful his friends came for him and not others. He would have been caught quickly unless his horse had wings, which Mormont asks if his horse does. A lot of foreshadowing here, but also a lot of interesting stuff being said here. One, I talked about this already. It's quite obvious that they were going to put people watching him. It's just obvious. And Jon kind of feels like a fool here. He kind of feels like an idiot. But something that's more interesting is why Mormont uses the idea of horse having wings. That seems like a reference to dragons, does it not? And also, we know that Jon is probably a Targaryen. He might be a Dane as well if you want to go that route. But if you do subscribe to him being someone that's going to ride a dragon, this is kind of some foreshadowing to maybe Jon will ride Rhaegal like we saw on the show. Jon notes he does not have a horse with wings. Jon felt like a fool, but Mormont continues, a shame we have use of a horse like that. Once again, hint of a dragon being used in the war with the others. Jon stood tall. He knew the penalty of desertion. And says as much to Mormont, saying he is not afraid to die. Mormont responds, or live, I hope, but he notes he is not deserted yet. If they killed every man who went to Molestown, there would be no one left to guard the wall. We know that there are men that sneak out to Molestown. If they did that, they're already low on men. They have to be a little bit pliable on how they're allowing men to do certain things, or else you're going to have nobody there. So quite a lot of wisdom once again from Mormont. But Mormont goes a step further, because he already reads Jon's thoughts. He knows what Jon is planning. Unless Jon means to desert once again and asks if that is his hope. And Jon remains silent. He doesn't know what to say, and what can he say? The truth is that yes, he is planning to leave. We just got done hearing him say that. Mormont says he thought so, and says Jon's father is dead, and asks if he thinks he can bring him back. Jon quietly responds, no. And this is the point that we get with Catelyn in the next chapter. It's really important that this is brought up here. Getting vengeance, or getting justice, whatever you want to call it, that is not going to bring back your loved ones. You know, you can do all these things. You can kill all these people. There's a famous quote about Baelon Targaryen in the top 100 video I did. Killing all these people will not bring back your brother. It won't bring back your father. It won't bring back whoever. And that's what Mormont is trying to tell him. And Mormont is pleased by that. As he begins to eat and notes, we have seen the dead rising, and he has no mind to see it again. He continues stating, Robb has a mighty host with all his bannermen who control more men than all the Night's Watch combined. Why do you imagine they need your help? Is he a great warrior, or have Grumpkin in your pocket to magic up your sword? It's a great point, right? What is Jon one sword going to do that isn't already going to be able to happen with all the men that are already there? And you might say, oh, well, Robb trusts Jon, so maybe he could give better counsel, maybe avoid some of the things that end up happening. But I don't think that's really the case. Jon and Robb are very similar in terms of the way they think. I don't think it would have changed much. But Jon, once again, has no words for Mormont. Mormont continues noting the war has touched more than just him. He himself has a sister going off riding to war with her daughters with Robb. We know this is Mage Mormont and her daughters. Jeor may not, get along with his sister, but he would still grieve if his sister died and her daughters and things of that nature. But you don't see him running off to help. He said the vows his place is here and asked Jon where his is. And Jon isn't sure. He wanted to say that he had no place. He was a bastard with no father or mother now, and no lands or inheritance. But instead he says he does not know. Jon is still struggling with the arc that's been going on for the entire book. He doesn't know who he is. He doesn't know his identity, and it's been about him finding that identity, and that's what he'll try to find by the end of this chapter. But that's going to get us into a quote that I want to read from the story, because I think, again, it's very important to Jon's arc in this book. I do, said Lord Commander Mormont. The cold winds are rising, Snow. Beyond the wall, the shadows lengthen. Cotter Pike writes of vast herds of elk streaming south and east towards the sea, and mammoths as well. He says one of his men discovered huge, misshapen footprints not 3 leagues from Eastwatch. Rangers from the Shadow Tower have found whole villages abandoned at night. Sir Dennis says they see the fires in the mountains, huge blazes that burn from dusk till dawn. Corin Halfhand took a captive in the depths of the gorge, and the man swears that Mance Rayder is massing all his people in some new, secret stronghold he's found. To what end, the gods only know. Do you think your Uncle Benjen was the only ranger we've lost this past year? Benjen, the raven squawked, bobbing its head, bits of egg dribbling from its beak. Benjen, Benjen. No, Jon said, there had been others. Too many. Do you think your brother's war is more important than ours? The old man barked. Jon chewed his lip. The raven flapped its wing at him. War, 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 it sang. It's not, Mormont told him. God save us, boy. You're not blind and you're not stupid. When dead men come hunting in the night, do you think it matters who sits the Iron Throne? No, Jon had not thought of it that way. And there's a lot to unpack there, right? It just seems like there's too much suspicious activity going on along the wall, with the wildlings massing, with rangers going disappearing, from the dead rising. All of this is just really bad for Westeros in terms of there seems like there is a growing threat of the others or all of the wildlings coming south. And in terms of the state of the world, it really doesn't matter who sits the Iron Throne as long as we're united to face that threat. And so Robb doesn't need Jon, but Jon is needed by the wall with his wolf and all of those things. That's the point. That Mormont is trying to give Jon some purpose outside of his family. He's trying to show him that he is needed here, something that Jon has never really felt. Remember, Jon is kind of an outcast at Winterfell. He's never allowed to be an equal of the Starks because of Catelyn. He's not placed to be eating with his family when Robert and the royal family come. He is seen as an embarrassment or, some sort of outcast. And so Jon now has a place where he's wanted, where he is needed. Mormont wants him to feel that way so that he doesn't desert. But that gets us into the last page of the chapter. Mormont continues stating, your Lord Father sent you to us, Jon. Why? Who can say? As the Raven continues stating, why? Mormont says all he knows is the Starks have the blood of the first men who built the wall. His wolf was the thing that led them to the dead men, and Mormont thinks that him and his wolf were meant to be here, and he wants them both to come with him when they go north of the wall. This is a huge shock. Why is the Lord Commander telling them that they're going to go north of the wall? But also, it's once again just building up in this mind. It's building up in this idea that Jon is needed and wanted. That's everything Mormont is trying to do at this time, manipulating Jon. Even though it might be for the better, he's still trying to manipulate Jon's feelings. Jon asks beyond the wall, as Mormont continues saying they will find Benjen. He will not sit idly by as the cold winds come. They need to know what is happening. Yes, I think there is a bit of wisdom there, right? You don't want to be fully blind, but at the same time, I question Mormont's response to all this quite heavily, because he states that the Night's Watch will ride out in force against Mance, the others, or whatever else they will find, and he means to lead them as he points the dagger at Jon. But you know there are way more wildlings than you. You know that there is this threat of the others out there. You've seen it firsthand. Why would you take your force that, again, the Night's Watch is already undermanned, and put them into the enemy's territory? You give up all advantages. I get it. I get the point is that Mormont wants answers. But he is taking a massive risk that I think is not going to give you any more information than you already knew. I think this is a very bad decision by Jeor Mormont. You guys can tell me what you guys think, but I think this ranging was a horrible idea. A horrible idea. But let me know what you guys think. Mormont finishes saying, by all the customs of the watch, his steward is also his squire, so he wants an answer from Jon. He does not want to wake up in the morning wondering if he has fled south. Is he a man of the Night's Watch or a boy playing at war? And this is where the big question happens. What is Jon's identity? Who is he going to choose to be? Jon straightened up at this and silently hopes his family will forgive him. Mormont has the right of it and confirms he is Mormont's man and he will not run off again. And Jon ends the storyline of Book 1 by being told to go put his sword back on. And that's it. That is Jon, Book 1. He has a very strong finish. It's definitely one of the better chapters for Jon. I think Jon, he's a weird plot line. Because I think it's a good plot line. I just think it does take a while to get going. But once it does, his last 3 or 4 chapters of this book are fantastic. It's just getting there, it's very slow. It's a slow build up to that moment. And I put it this way, right? I think Daenerys and Jon, their storylines in Book 1 parallel each other really, really well. They have a lot of the same beats in terms of what are their themes and such like. That's why I really like the first book. It really feels like it mixes a lot of the themes of the story together so well. I just think Daenerys starts off way better than Jon. I think Daenerys, her early chapters, her dynamic with her brother, makes her storyline really interesting until you get to the point where Daenerys is kind of her own character and then doesn't need Viserys anymore. Jon struggles, I think, out of the gate to really get involved in his storyline, but he's built up as one of the most intriguing going into the second book, even though it's probably not his best book by all accounts. But that is the end of Jon IX, the end of Jon in the storyline. We only have 2 chapters left in Catelyn and also Daenerys. But I hope you guys all enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.